I would reserve questions till after Mr. Muda Yusuf has shared with us and has spoken. But I want to tell participants that you will get the presentations immediately after this. All those that are registered will get all the presentations immediately after the event. I'll call on the next participant, Mr. Muda Yusuf. Mr. Muda Yusuf is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. It's a pleasure to be here. And I must express my appreciation to the organizers, particularly Pastor Ben, for the opportunity of this of participating in this program. The last two speakers have actually covered some of the grants that I will have spoken to. So I will not like to repeat what they have said. Of course, the opportunities are immense, as they have said, from the point of view of the population and the point of view of the continental GDP, which is about 3.4 trillion US. Trade liberalization, there's also the welfare impacts. There is the prospect of moving to the Continental Customs Union, harnessing trade complementarities across economies and the sub-region. These are fantastic opportunities that the AFCTA is presenting. The impact on economic growth, impact on industrialization and structural transformation. So generally, I believe there is a very strong business case for the AFCTA. But we also need to worry about the implications for domestic investors, particularly the small and medium enterprises that operate in the economy. And it's important we have the safeguards to protect them as we step into the continental free trade regime. First, let's look at the structure of the economy itself. The service sector currently accounts for 53% of our GDP. Agriculture accounts for about 25%, manufacturing about 9%. So we can see where the strength of this economy is. We can see areas in which we are comparatively more competitive, and that is the essence of this particular slide. If our service sector is accounting for 53% of GDP, we can see that in terms of manufacturing and agriculture, there is not much that we can offer in terms of international competitiveness or in terms of the market that we are looking at. Then if you look at the structure of our exports, international trade is about imports and exports. Currently, about 90% of our export is in oil and gas. Agriculture accounts for about 2.5%, manufacturing about 2%. So that means that in this trade arrangement, international trade arrangement, we don't really have much to offer in the area of agriculture and in the area of manufacturing. The bit of export that we're able to do in these other sectors are largely to the West African sub-region, that is sub-regional market. So again, this is showing the kind of weaknesses that this economy has as we open up to this continental free trade agreement. Of course, as previous speakers have said, and I've highlighted in my review of the structure of the economy, we seem to have better competitive advantage in the area of the services. We are talking about financial services, ICT, professional services, entertainment, commerce, and all of that. And of course, that will come with the transparency of service regulations across the continent, mutual recognition of standards and licensing and certification of service suppliers, and progressive liberalization of the service sector. But the point here is that in terms of competitiveness, we seem to be more competitive and ready in the area of services, just as previous speakers have said. Now, because when we talk about EFCTA, we are talking about international trade. And international trade is basically about competitiveness. And we need to look at what are the key drivers of competitiveness to know the gaps that we need to fill in this economy, particularly from the point of view of the investors. First, there's the economies of scale. And when we talk about the economies of scale, it is only the multinationals and some big conglomerates that have this advantage as we speak. Then there is the issue of productivity. We are having serious productivity issues with many sectors. We know how small businesses, particularly those who are in production, we know how they are struggling to survive, either from the structural point of view, financing, the ports, the regulatory environment, the policy environment, and all of this. So there is a major productivity issue that businesses are grappling with, which may impact on their competitiveness as we step into the continental free trade area. Local value addition is also key. To a large extent, competitiveness can leverage on local value addition. Because what we are having now is a major disadvantage where many of our manufacturing companies are largely dependent on imports. That is a very weak point, which may work against a lot of our investors in the manufacturing space. Technology and innovation can help in the area of competitiveness, labor-intensive businesses, infrastructure quality. Of course, we have a major problem as far as infrastructure quality is concerned. Even the committee that was set up by the federal government on the assessment and impact and readiness committee, who was supposed to advise the federal government, highlighted the fact that in many of these key infrastructure areas, Nigeria is actually not ready. So infrastructure quality is a major issue. The port efficiency, international trade, particularly when we talk about merchandise trade, has a lot to do with the quality of the efficiency at our ports. We all know what our ports are. That is going to present a major competitiveness issue. And we also should realize that the benefits and the costs of this AFCTA will not be equally distributed. It is those countries that are already advanced industrially, that have the quality of infrastructure, at least in the short to medium term, those will be the countries that will benefit from this AFCTA. Then competitiveness concerns that we have in the private sector as far as this AFCTA is concerned is the high energy cost. You know what our energy environment is. High transportation costs, I'm talking about domestic connectivity. High transaction costs at the ports. Cost of fund, well, is getting better now, so that may not be an issue for now. Cost inefficiency and corruption is still a major problem that we are grappling with. High cost of intermediate products. The foreign exchange policy, we cannot do an effective participation in international trade if you have the kind of foreign exchange policy that we have. So there is so much uncertainty, there's so much volatility, there's so much inconsistency and all of that around our foreign exchange policy. And on top of that, there's a liquidity problem. So how do we do it? How do we undertake international trade when you cannot easily just pay your customers, settle your contractual agreements and all of that? That is a major issue, which we need to also resolve. Of course, the probability of high import surge is very much there because we're a nation that trades, we are very good in trading. And once we go fully into the continental free trade area, our traders will go all over the continent and go and source for the cheapest products and bring them here. Because when it comes to matters like this, it's not so much about the issue of nationalism, It's about issue of returns. It's about where people can make the best profit. So we are likely to see a high import surge. Then the risks to AfCFTA itself, there's a major risk with the rule of origin. Even with ECOWAS, we are grappling with that problem. Where there is a transshipment problem, importers will bring products from outside the continent or outside the region, relabel it in some other countries, and bring them in as products that are produced in the region. So that's a major issue. It's a major issue because many African countries have a major problem with institutions. Their institutions are very weak. And we all know what it is with our own institutions here. So the rule of origin is going to pose a major risk to AfCFTA. The dependence of African economies on commodity products. The non-tariff barriers is a major problem. I don't know what capacity the AfCFTA has to correct the issues of non-tariff barriers. Even in ECOWAS, we have that problem. And it has been difficult for even ECOWAS to sanction any country. So non-tariff barriers is one of the biggest risks to the AfCFTA. Of course, most African economies are underdeveloped, confronted with trade supply constraints, inefficient transport structure, and connectivity issues. Trade, again, is about connectivity. Right now in Africa, we have very weak connectivity. So if you want to move something like cement from here to other parts of Africa and so on, where is the infrastructure? How much can you do by road? So these are some of the issues. Of course, we have economic and political instability issues. Then there's also the risk of business disruption. Now, when people set up businesses, particularly those who are in the industrial sector space, because in the manufacturing sector space, the fixed costs are often very high. And when you are in an investment where your fixed cost is high, you don't have that flexibility in terms of changing your product lines, changing your business model. All those things are not there. So when people set up business based on a particular competitiveness assumption, now the competitiveness landscape is changing because we are now going to be exposed to much, tougher competitiveness environment. That is likely a major source of business disruption for many of our businesses, especially in the manufacturing space, and more specifically for those of them that are in the medium and small enterprise space. And we should also realize that the Nigerian manufacturing sector, the way they are configured, are largely dependent on domestic markets. They don't have that much capacity to compete globally or internationally. So that can also be a major source of business disruption. Many of them are surviving on the back of the protectionist policies of government. The same thing with our agricultural sector. Domestic firms are not competitive, so many of them may be adversely impacted. Many companies that have high import dependence may be challenged. SMEs in manufacturing will struggle to cope with the new competitiveness landscape. Our domestic firms may have to review their business models in the light of the AfCFTA business disruptions. Then it is also important that we have a national AfCFTA strategy. Because right now, we don't seem to have that kind of strategy in place to identify the opportunity sectors, the export potentials, and based on statistical analysis, to identify the constraints to target sectors, and also the strategic actions for boosting identified target sectors. The report of the Technical Committee on the Readiness and Impact of the AfCFTA, which was set up by the federal government, the report has been presented, identifying many of these bottlenecks and rigidities. But as we speak, nothing has changed. The infrastructure situation is still the same. The port situation is still the same. The policy environment is still the same. The forex environment is the same. So there are so many things that we need to do, which may create quite a number of challenges for businesses in the short to medium term. So thank you very much. That is, I draw the curtain on my presentation there. Thank you.
Our capacity. about productivity, our productivity readiness, infrastructure issues, the cost to serve, connectivity issues, and it was essentially a laundry list of issues, and pretty much expected from someone like Mr. Muda Yusuf, who represents the private sector. But as I sat and listened, what I thought about was an analogy to bring to this situation. And I remember very much when during the telco revolution, as it was, when the big telcos came to town, the question was inadequate infrastructure to support telco services around the country. But I remember then that there was a popular saying in business rooms and in boardrooms. It was to sort of adopt the MTN model. So it was to spread anyway, just be there anyway, because somehow the services were required. I think the after is here to stay, whether we like it or not, whether we are ready or not. So it is to put on our Nigerianness, our Nigerian attitude, and to take it on strong. To know that all of a sudden my competition is no longer just the Nigerian businesses, but it is the Ghanaian business, it is the Moroccan business, it is the Kenyan business, it's the South African business. All of a sudden, Africa has become the playfield, and for us to. And I guess this is a family meeting amongst Nigerians. Those who are here and are not Nigerians are Nigerians by default. This is the time for us to put on our Nigerian attitude and be sure that the world is our oyster, and then step up our game as it is. It's a call to step up our game.